All right, I'm back. It's day 3 of this YouTube kind of challenge. My plan is to try and make 30 of these in 30 days. Again, walking through my process of figuring out how you go from having an ineffective creative writing system to developing an effective system that actually works. Again, something I've tried many times, but I'm going to be a little more deliberate about it this time and try and put some real experiments into place to see what we can do. So, to kind of prepare for that, I thought it would make sense to talk a little bit about who I am, what I'm even trying to do, and what my problems are, so that you understand what exactly it is that I'm trying to fix with these experiments. So, I've been writing since I was 8 years old, consistently. I've always gravitated towards long form fiction, so that means novels. I started writing my first novel when I was 9. Never got to the end of it. I've started many, many, many more since then, and for the most part, I've never really gotten to the end of any of them. There are some exceptions to that. I have reached the end of a few kind of high intensity projects like NaNoWriMo style writing, but I never really considered them finished because even though I reached a point where I typed the end, they were so messy and so just kind of zany and off the cuff. Like I was just writing whatever I needed to write to get to the end. Um, which I understand that all first drafts of anything are shit. But at the same time, these were not even in a direction where I would want to find the gold inside them. They were just experiments in writing quickly, and I wasn't even interested in the stories. I just managed to get to the end. So when it comes to getting to the end of a story that I'm actually interested in and that I actually started with some kind of, I don't know, some kind of like gut feeling of where that story was supposed to go, I've really never gotten to the end of any of those ever, which is absurd. I'm now 32, so do the math. It's been a lot of failed attempts. So I really, really know what I'm talking about when it comes to starting and not finishing. But what I only just realized very recently, because I thought that I was actually writing quite well and just getting distracted and moving on to new projects. But what I've discovered is that it's not that I'm just getting distracted and moving on to new projects. I'm actually reaching the same sticking point in every single story. Um, and and pretty much the sticking point, if I'm going to be honest, is the middle. But what happens is I have a kind of a vague idea when I go into a story. I do some writing to kind of develop that idea, to start figuring out what the story is that I want to tell. That idea gives me new ideas. And so then I kind of go back to the beginning to sort of put those new ideas into place, and I get a little farther. Then I suddenly realize, oh, this would make so much more sense if something, and I kind of go back and restructure it to make sense for that thing. And so I'm kind of doing this process of like going back to the beginning, developing a little farther, going back to the beginning, developing even farther. And that works up to about what I would probably call the quarter way point of a story. And then at that point, this process stops working. Every time I go back, I come back to the same point, and then I go back and I come back to the same point. So I start like recombing the same thread over and over again, and I can't ever get out of that loop. Now, in theory, the simple answer here would be to just like make a decision and commit to it. But let me tell you what's happening in my brain here. What's happening is that every possible decision kind of unleashes this network of additional possible decisions, and each of those has a network of additional possible decisions. So it's like this fractal problem where I had this idea here and I can see it branching out into so many different directions. And even if I have a kind of an endpoint in mind, there are so many ways to get there that I have no kind of sense of how to navigate through this. And so very basic decisions like I'm just going to make something up. Let's say some my characters are stuck in a dungeon and it's like how are they going to get out of this dungeon? Very basic stuff like, oh, one of them develops a superpower and blows a hole through the wall versus, oh, one of them is very clever and talks their way out of it, will have extremely different implications for the story, even though both of them involve getting out of the dungeon. And I can get so hung up on that, like the implications of having a character have superpowers versus the implications of having a character be really smart enough to talk their way out of it. And then once they've talked their way out of it, what is that conversation going to do to the character they talk their way? I mean, there's like, I go absolutely insane with all of the possibilities, and I have no system for filtering it back down. I have never heard anyone else talk about their creative process in exactly this way before. But again, not many people are talking about exactly what's going on in their heads with their creative processes. So I have a feeling I'm not alone in this. I have a feeling there are plenty of other writers out there who struggle with the same thing. If you're one of them, I would absolutely love to hear from you. And especially if you have struggled with this and figured out a way of rethinking this to help yourself get out of it. I'd be really curious. For right now, I have realized that writing itself isn't necessarily the way out, because I just create more and more possibilities, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And just saying, oh, I just have to make a decision and stick to it, really doesn't work either, because it's very hard for me to trust a decision or to have the gumption to kind of back up that decision unless I feel like it was made with a little more weight than like, oh, I guess I'll just pick one of these and go with it and see where it takes me. I would love to be able to do that, but I've tried that tactic before, and I can't trust it enough to let it carry me through the rest of the way. So what I'm currently experimenting with is actually just writing lists, lots and lots of lists, only lists. And you can hear about more of that tomorrow.